Yo, what's happening, folks? Looks like we're not going to be late because Bear got his shit straightened out.
I got the shit together. We swore in the first 9 seconds, so we can't monetize this ever. Fuck everyone.
Excellent. That's the way we're going to roll here. So welcome to the first episode of yet another paranormal podcast. Of course, everybody knows us here on YouTube, I think. I'm Cody B, and I'm joined by Bear.
Bear the Gen X GM, and you have to say the name of the podcast. Probably it's like yet another paranormal podcast. Like it has to be like this. Is like, why is this happening? Yet one more. Why? But here we are.
But I say, why not? Because me and Bear actually have been talking about doing this for a while. We're both enthusiasts of this sort of thing. UFOs and ghosts and Bigfoot and all that stuff. So I figured, why not, do a podcast about it?
Yeah, why not?
And I figure since it is our first inaugural episode, what I'd like to do is, and I'll start with Bear, is kind of talk about where we started, where our enthusiasm started, where our interest started with this kind of stuff. And also, have you ever had any weird paranormal encounters?
So my interest probably with the paranormal of all ilk probably started from my childhood, from, ghost stories and reading and movies and things like that. Growing up in the country, there was a haunted house around every corner and a gully you didn't go in because that's where they're going to get you. And there was a phantom ship on the bay, and it was all, I never saw any of this shit, but, it was all part of the culture. And as a result, I shared, I developed a strong interest in it. I have never demonstrably experienced a paranormal experience in my life, despite wanting to. There's a couple of things we'll discuss later as podcasts go down and we get to certain topics that are questionable for me, very questionable. So stay tuned for shadow people at some point and probably alien abductions, and we'll talk about that and I'll share more then. But beyond that, no, never seen a ghost, never seen a UFO, never seen a cryptid, never had weird, just never. And I think 99.9% of it is 100% woo.
Well, cool. So what is your favorite, in all the sphere of paranormal stuff, UFOs, Bigfoot, cryptids, all this stuff, what is your favorite?
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, it'll always be UFOs and extraterrestrials and stuff like that. That is always, always, always going to be my favorite stuff. Yeah,
I think it's mine too. So for me, it's kind of the same. I've always been interested in this stuff as far back as I can remember. I grew up watching sci-fi movies and horror movies, and from the time I was able to read, I was reading books about this stuff. But I think my interest, as far as the movies and stuff I was watching, it was all, Hollywood movies about alien invaders and all that stuff. But where I actually got involved in the real life paranormal topic, I think where it started, I was about 7 or 8 years old. And I used to go, my family's actually from Texas.
Yeah.
And so every summer I'd go down and visit my grandpa down in Houston. He lived outside of Houston, Texas. And I'd spend a few weeks there with my cousin. One of my cousin on my mom's side lived down there too. And so we'd get together at my grandpa's house, and he flew model airplanes, RC airplanes. Okay. And we called him Grandpa Airplane because of that. So he would take us camping too, so we go fly planes and do all this stuff, but he also take us camping out to the flying field, which is out in the middle of nowhere. And in Texas, and I'm sure you know this, out in the country, you can see the stars, you can see satellites, the galaxy. It's incredible.
You can see the Milky Way on the right night, and it's really a cool thing that I think everybody needs to experience.
Yeah, for sure. So I was about 7 or 8, and we went camping, and we're sitting there around the fire, roasting weenies and all that stuff. And he's telling us about this book he just read. Now, I didn't realize what he was telling us came from a book at the time till I was much older, but he was telling us about all this stuff from the book Chariots of the Gods.
Oh, yeah.
And he was he was really into this stuff anyways. He was always really into science and space. He was an engineer. And he was really, really interested in this stuff. And he liked talking to me and my cousin about it because, we held interest in this stuff too. And he would talk to other adults and they didn't give a shit. But he had just read this book. And he was a very spiritual guy too. So he developed this belief from Chariots of the Gods. And he's talking about Ezekiel 10:10 and the chariots of fire and all this stuff. And we were just
the wheel with eyes.
And so I was all into this already. I'm like, wow. So this is the first time I'd heard about like real world UFOs and aliens. That first time it became like a realization this could be a real phenomenon.
Sure.
So that night we went to bed, and I did have a UFO encounter that night. I woke up that night. It's only time I've had a UFO encounter. And so I woke up that night. I went to take a piss out in the field because there were bathrooms there, but they were full of rattlesnakes, and because it's Texas.
Yeah.
And so I went out to the field, take a piss, and I saw this fireball fall from the sky. Now you see shooting stars and stuff out in, the Texas sky all the time. So I just thought it was a really big meteorite, and fell from the sky, but it looked like it almost touched the ground, stopped, started glowing, and then shot back up into the sky almost immediately, and scared the shit out of me. Right. And so it was really weird. And that's the only, I could say, quote unquote, UFO sighting I had. I don't know what I saw. Even to this day, I'm kind of like, well, it could have just been I don't know. It could have been some trick of the light. It could have been some phenomenon I'm not familiar with. Either way, it was pretty strange, and I'm going to chalk it up to the UFO.
But hey, it happened deep in the heart of Texas, so that works out well.
Yeah. So that's the only.
Thank you for the knocks. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Actually, to clarify, I would say probably of all the UFO stuff, my favorite subcategory of extraterrestrial UFO stuff is ancient astronaut theory.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I hate the term ancient aliens. It drives me insane. Yeah. It's ancient astronaut, and that's a whole other beast. But I really, really, really love that sort of stuff. Yeah.
So that's the only UFO encounter I had. Now I have had a ghost encounter too. I've had some other strange things, but I can't really say that happened. But this one was really weird, and it happened about 2008. And I was over at my ex-girlfriend's house. And back then, I used to stay up really late all night. Everybody went to bed, and I'm up in her living room reading a book at her family's house because I couldn't go to bed, and they had a bunch of books. So I'm sitting there reading a book, and all of a sudden I see the door to the basement open. I go to check it out. I just kind of shrug and leave it open. I figured her dad came up because he was staying in the basement. I figured he came up or something. Went back to read my book, and I saw a full-bodied apparition very quickly, like in my peripheral vision as I'm reading the book like this in front of me. It looked like an old lady with a bun and everything. It literally looked like the woman, the librarian from Ghostbusters. Like it was a full-bodied apparition that you would imagine just like
a free-floating apparition,
free-floating
class 4 free-floating apparition.
But it was like it was very quick. And it just like flew by right in front of, like in my upper peripheral vision, and it freaked me the fuck out. And of course I went around the house, like woke everybody up and was like, what the hell happened? The weird part is the next morning we found out her dad's mom died.
Okay.
And she showed me a picture, and it was pretty close to what I think I saw. Of course, it only lasted like a couple seconds. So that was weird. I don't know what that was. Of course, it was late at night. I was, I wasn't on anything, but I probably had been up for a day or two. So who knows? You see things, when you're, but so those are the two like paranormal experiences I could say I have had, and of course, like you, my favorite topic in all this field of the paranormal is UFOs and extraterrestrials, and that's I'm still obsessed with the subject to this day. But like you, I'm also a skeptic. Most of it. I want to believe, I want to believe, but I am a skeptic. So I think it'll be interesting because we're both kind of skeptical on the subject, but also really fascinated. But also tonight we do have a real topic we're going to bring up. So every week we're going to have a different topic, whether it's a case file or even just a broad subject. We're going to alternate who picks the topic. Since kind of my idea to start this, I picked the topic this week. And this week, we're going to be talking about the Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting from 1947.
The one that really started it all.
It did. This was the first, even though there were other UFO sightings before this this was the first modern UFO sighting, and considered the one. This really is the one that started the whole UFO craze.
Well, I mean, it's easy to call it the first post World War II.
Absolutely,
Effectively,
absolutely.
right? So we can always go do another show on Foo Fighters and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
Not the band, though I love them. But in this case, we're talking about the first post-war civilian UFO sighting of any note.
that's right. And the first one that really caught large public attention, and it started, after this very quickly. I mean, this is only like a week or two before Roswell.
Yep.
And then, from there, it just like was this constant wave of UFO sightings after this happened. So I'm going to quickly summarize the story. We'll talk about it. You can interrupt at any time, Bear, if you have some comments or anything. But basically, I'm just going to summarize the story for people that don't know what the story's about. So this was in June 24th, 1947. Now, Roswell, just to get perspective, happened on July the 8th is when it made the papers. Now, it probably, of course, happened before that, but it was reported in the papers July the 8th, so not very long before Roswell. This happened in Washington State, and I'm going to put a picture up here. I've got a bunch of pictures there, actually.
So for those of you who listen to this later on the audio podcast, what are you doing not coming over and seeing it on YouTube?
Yeah, what are you not doing? Come and see us here.
Come on.
So this is a picture of Kenneth Arnold from around that time. Kenneth Arnold was a private businessman and a private aviator, and he was on his way back from a business trip. And I'm going to switch slides here, and this is a map of the trip he was taking there. So he was taking a trip to Yakima in Washington State. He had just came back from this other place. He was in the fire extinguisher business, essentially. He had just installed some fire suppression equipment, and he was coming back to Yakima. His final destination was in Preston, Oregon, to an air show. Now, he was going to go by Mount Rainier in Washington because there was a military aircraft that crashed there sometime before this, and there was a reward out to find this aircraft, and it supposedly crashed near Mount Rainier. So
just for context's sake, this mountain range is the Cascades. They are the westernmost end of the Rocky Mountains, that whole, the Western Cordillera that runs down the continent. And basically, the Pacific Northwest is a rainforest. It's a temperate rainforest, but it's a rainforest. It is a massive green space. And unless you've seen it, you have no idea how big it is, which is why whenever you hear people going, we would have found a Bigfoot by then, go check out the Pacific Northwest and you'll see how silly that statement becomes real quick. And in fact, what happens is many planes over the years have gone down in these mountains and they can't find them, right? Like they can't, this is before GPS locators and stuff like that. They can't find these planes. So they put out a bounty system for aviators who wanted to log a little extra time and do a little flight path as logged or what have you, to be able to see if they could spot remains of planes and possibly earn a reward for finding things like this. Now, Kenneth was done his flight and he booked an extra hour so he could fly around a little bit and look for some stuff. Back to you, Cody.
That's correct. It's crazy. I mean, like, I've never been to the Pacific Northwest.
I lived there for 8 years, man. It's insane.
Yeah, I know. I've known many people from there. My wife lived there for a time, and it's literally just a giant forest. So
massive.
Yeah, it's massive. If you look at a map, look at a Google satellite image of it. Just to give you, like, anybody that's not aware, it's just insane.
It's essentially effective. I'm not sure the exact dimensions, but in my mind, you're looking at a forest that, if you take in the Canadian side as well, is roughly probably the same size as, I don't know, Arizona, maybe Montana, but it's also completely mountainous. So it's lots of valleys and crevices and hollers and all kinds of stuff going on. Lots of places to get lost up there.
Yes. So as Mr. Arnold was approaching Mount Rainier, there is some conflicting reports from him specifically about how far he was from the mountain. His original report that he wrote actually like an article for a magazine and then later published it as kind of a, I guess, what would you say, like a pamphlet kind of book that you could buy out of the back of magazines and stuff.
Yeah.
And he did go on to write other books, which we can talk about later. But this first account he gave, there's some conflicting reports in even his own accounts, which is interesting. But in his original account, he said he was only 20 to 30 miles from the mountain when he encountered a big flash of light. And then north to south, there were 9 objects that flew in front of him at incredible speeds.
In a string.
In a string. Now, he described these objects floating like they were not flying like a regular aircraft would. They were actually like erratic, and they were skipping around. He described it like skipping a rock on water is the way he described these things flying. And they were flying in formation in like a line.
Now there's a thing. It's officially reported that they were going around 1,200 miles an hour, which is almost about 1,900 kilometers an hour. Right. He later said that was a low end estimate he put because he really felt they were probably moving over 3,000 miles an hour and felt no one would take him seriously if he actually said that.
Yes. So he was a trained observer. He was a trained rescue observer. He probably took courses in it or something. I'm not sure of his background, but he started automatically just observing these objects and clocking their speed. Now, he didn't estimate it in the air. He waited till he got on the ground to talk with some other people, and they estimated the speed. But immediately when he saw these things, he started clocking the speed. Now, the way he describes seeing these things is that they looked like a saucer, like a delta-shaped saucer. Now, there's a couple, again, this is a conflicting report from him. And so this is his original depiction of what he saw that he gave to the Air Force.
Yeah.
Which differs very strongly from what he said later on, because he said later on they looked more like a boomerang.
Yeah.
And then he changed his story again and said 8 of them looked like this. And then the lead one was a different color, and it looked like a boomerang. And I'll show you a picture here of the...
Yeah, do you have the art on that one? Because I love that art.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, this is really cool. So this is a later thing he had done by an artist for, I think, probably for one of his publications. And this is what he later described these things as looking at. But he changed his tune a little bit and said that's what the lead object looked like, but the rest of them look like those other things. So
now, let's take a moment.
Yeah.
I have never heard a human being tell me a story and it have the exact same details twice. Let's keep that in mind, right? Yeah. That is humans. You use the term trained observer. I'm a trained observer. It means nothing. Yeah. It literally means nothing, right? It's not like they put you in a room and start doing flashcard tests to see how you act. You're just taught to try and pay attention to details. And then the part of trained observing is then writing down your notes of what you observed later. So most people are going to change their story because the mind is a horrible, horrible Swiss cheese factory of incoherent thought trying to make things make sense. And your brain will fill in details to make things rational. So I can forgive him for his changes in story. They're not as spurious as some of the other ones I've heard over the years from some of these UFO people. But there you go. I just wanted to make sure we all had that on the page so that everyone understands we're not debunking him by saying, oh, no, he had a lot of holes in his story. It's a natural occurring thing. And
it is a natural occurring thing. And
it's why Travis Walton is so suspect. But we'll get into that on the Travis Walton
episode. Right. We'll do Travis Walton in another episode. But yeah, I mean, and the other thing is, you're right. Like, it's kind of like the big fish story, right? Like the things you remember from a long time ago, it gets more detailed and more bigger, and it might not, your memory is not flawless. It's actually very flawed, right? Mm-hmm. So that doesn't mean that he didn't see something, but he might have forgot the details, or he might have just thought longer on the details over the years and made observations. Now, he says that this whole encounter happened in about 2.5 minutes. He saw these things fly by Mount Rainier, and he saw them fly to the south of the mountain. And all this time he observed them. And the time that it took from him to see the bright flash of light, which I find very interesting. These things appeared out of nowhere, went north to south. All this happened in about 2.5 minutes.
Well, so, he had said the bright flash of light he thought was originally sunlight reflecting off of fuselage on the side of Mount Rainier, thinking, oh, maybe I found a plane. So he immediately drew his attention, and then he saw this thing.
Right. Yeah. So, so it's very interesting. Now, so he observed all this. His initial reaction was these were probably military aircraft. because in 1947, there was a lot of experimentation. Everybody was aware. Everybody in the public was aware. There was a lot of experimentation going on with military aircraft. But he also knew that these things were flying faster than any aircraft would be possible at that time. Because you got to remember, this is even before like the sound barrier was broken, right? So these things were flying. He noted right off the bat, these things are flying faster than anything he's seen. But he didn't immediately jump to conclusions about extraterrestrials or any of that. Of course, that wasn't even in the public zeitgeist at that time, which is another thing of note, right? He didn't jump to that conclusion immediately. Now, so he landed at Yakimi. And when he got there, he landed to refuel his plane and then go on to Preston, Oregon. And he told the story to the other pilots about what he saw. And it was there that they worked out how fast these things must have been going. From the time he timed everything, he could gauge the distance and he had maps. They timed everything and he said 1,200 miles an hour. Now
he did rounded down conservative estimate.
Yes. And now, even then, though, like some of the other pilots told him that these things were traveling faster, at least 1,200, up to 1,800, maybe 3,000 miles an hour.
It was a wide spectrum on the thing. He originally was thinking 1,800. Some of the other guys were saying up to 2,000 to 3,000. And then he conservatively said 1,200 because he didn't want it to seem, he knew people would just dismiss him out of hand if it was too extreme.
Yes, exactly. So, he just told the pilots what he saw, and they all thought it was peculiar. And of course, pilots, are a community that likes to spread rumors. So they all started chitter-chattering and talking to each other. Now, when he finally ended up in Preston, that's where the press was waiting for him, the local press. They had heard about this story through all the local pilots, and they immediately wanted a story. And a reporter, one of the local newspapers, took down his story, and he told them what he saw. And this is where the coin flying saucer came from, because part of his description was that it looked like two saucer plates with like a delta wing, and they just said flying saucer in the newspaper article. So this is where the term flying saucer was coined from then on.
Yeah. Now we have to keep in mind really quick. Yeah. The terminology has changed, right? It was Foo Fighters, then it was flying saucers, then it was just universally UFOs, and now it's UAPs. Unidentified anomalous phenomena.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's just, when I was a kid, flying saucer was falling out of favor and UFO was coming up. The terminology changes, but in the end, he never said it was flying saucers. It was the reporter.
Exactly. So he even then was not convinced that it was extraterrestrials. It was actually the press that kind of took that story and kind of like poked and prodded at him, saying, "Hey, do you think this could be from like another planet? Another planet?" Yeah. And he really didn't jump to that conclusion. Even then, it wasn't until later that he did jump to that conclusion and said yes. Once he calculated the speed and started thinking about it and mulling over it, he said, "Yes, I believe these things are extraterrestrial. I believe these things are from another planet or another place, and they're not native to Earth, at least." Now, the interesting thing about Kenneth is later on through his years, he became obsessed with this subject. Like he just became absolutely obsessed with it, which is interesting because most people, when they have some kind of encounter like this, do become obsessed. As we'll see later in other case files, people kind of like absorbs their life once they encounter something like this really up close. And it did him as well. And he spent days and years, decades, the rest of his life flying up in the air in his plane, trying to find more of these things. Mm-hmm. Now, he claims later on in life that he did actually see the same things again, the same number and the same things. And and he also went on to write 2 other books about his subject, his encounter, but also other people's encounters. Yeah. So he absolutely became consumed by this. The other interesting thing is he right off the bat reported this to the Air Force and the FBI. And the Air Force did investigate this initially, and they wrote it off as, bullshit. Right off the bat, they said, "This is bullshit. This is not real. You imagine things," and they came up with every excuse that he didn't see these things. But there is an interesting story from Kenneth. This is from one of his firsthand accounts, and I'll bring up the picture here. That he went into the major's office when he heard when the report came back to him about what it was and what he saw. He went back and said, "No, it wasn't it. I wasn't hallucinating. Didn't see a mirage. You know, I'm a pilot. I've encountered all these different things. It wasn't that. I saw something." And he saw on the wall, supposedly, this picture. And this is a picture that was taken in Phoenix, Arizona, the same year, about a month later. And it was on the Air Force major's wall. And it was one of the other UFO cases that they were investigating at the time. So kind of interesting because I thought this was interesting because this craft really does matter. Whatever it is, it might just be bullshit, but whatever this blurry, crappy image is, it does match the description of what he saw in his original diagram. So much. Yeah. So it's really interesting. The other one, I didn't bring up the video, but there's a really famous video circulating around now of the UFO flying by that plane, like in South
the one that
America.
comes up by the propeller, plane?
Yeah. And if you pause that video, that craft looks very similar to this as well.
Yeah.
Except it's a little bit more round on the top, but it looks very similar to what this is. So anyways, it's a really interesting case. And so anything else of note about this case that you want to
I want to point out something, just not so much about the case, but in general. It's been almost 80 years since this happened, 75 years, something like that. I mean, it's been a long time. And one of the most frequent debunkings you'll hear of UFO sightings is, it's just advanced military technology that they're testing out. Well, if this was something they were testing out 80 years ago, we know about the SR-71. We know about the U-2 spy plane. We know about all these other things that were tested, the bomber, the B-1, stuff like that. Why have these things not shown up 80 years later, right? And this is where we get into that problem of there are two sets of UAP, using the modern vernacular, that we have to look into. The ones that are, obviously military craft being tested, and the others that are just unexplainable and defy reason. And for me, I think at this point in time, I can fairly say, I believe Kenneth Arnold encountered something that was unexplainable. It was not military aircraft, and it was not secret Soviet spy craft or anything like that. It was something unknown. Now, I'm not going to say it's aliens. I'm not going to say anything like that. I'm just going to say it's an unknown event. What he saw was a mystery and remains one to this day.
It remains a mystery, but it remains a very interesting mystery. One thing I think very compelling about this case and gives it more validity is this is before the UFO craze, right? This kind of started that. And so for him to just make this up out of the fly, why would he do that? There was no reason. He didn't really gain anything out of this, first off. Second off, there were no military aircraft, like we just said, that could fly at these speeds, like at that time. We know. That I mean, again, we know of. That we know of. I mean, even Chuck Yeager didn't make his historical flight until October of that year. And so, supposedly, unless there was some other secret military classified thing we don't know about.
Yeah, exactly. I want to believe, but no, you're right. And this is the thing we have to deal with, is that once you get into this rabbit hole of investigating these types of things or learning about these types of things, you wind up finding yourself in a very strange world of honest, genuine people who had an experience that they just want to talk about, mentally challenged, deficient, damaged people who just want attention and are glomming onto it so that they can get something out of it. And then there's the revealed and proven U.S. military government disinformation programs that have been put out to mess with people and make them believe things that aren't true, or now they say may contain grains of truth and what have you. But at the end of the day, it muddies the waters to a point where it's like chocolate milk. You cannot see the bottom of the glass. It ain't going to happen. You know what I mean? Until we drain the glass. And hopefully we will get around to that, as this... There's always been a larger percentage of the population in my lifetime who believed in this stuff than who didn't believe in this stuff. And that figure has only grown with time. I had the pleasure of spending a long period of my life with a very beautiful Indian woman who basically we would talk about this stuff, and she would just like explain to me how in India, no one doubts it.
Right.
It's culturally normal for them to go, yeah, aliens and spaceships, absolutely. So much so that if you read the old text, they talk about the Viman, which is spelled Vimana, but it's pronounced Viman, which is basically the flying castles of the gods. And it's such a prevalent word that it's actually the word in Hindi for plane. You know, when you take an airplane, it's just a Vimana, or Viman. You know, like it's culturally acceptable there. But for some reason, in Western civilization, it's crazy talk and woo woo, and it has to be debunked and made fun of and all this kind of stuff. And at some point in my life, I found myself thinking, why is it there's such a concentrated effort to debunk this stuff, to make people who experience this stuff seem like they're crazy people or drunk or delusional? What is the obsession in Western culture with this idea? And I haven't come to the answer yet. And hopefully we'll do an episode on Blue Book at some point. We can talk about all the stuff all the underhanded stuff that happened.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we could talk about it a little bit here because this sighting was actually one of the first Project Blue Book investigations.
Okay, and who's the guy in charge of Blue Book? I forget. I'm going to look him up. Go ahead and talk. I'm going to look up some. No, Hynek was the second guy. There was another guy before Hynek, though. The guy, the general or whatever.
Oh, the general in charge. Yeah.
What the hell was his name? My God, I can't remember what his name was. Anyway, this guy was the guy who put their operating procedure as, if you can find a remotely plausible explanation, use that and debunk it. So it's not like they were doing, Project Blue Book, or which before that was called Project Grudge, and then Project Sign, were not legitimate investigations. They were biased and prejudiced because the military wanted them to be, which is a really terrifying thing if we think about that, right? If we're going to be dealing with a situation, Condon, that's what the name I was looking for. If we're going to be dealing with a situation where we're expecting the people who are in charge of the air to do a serious investigation about the things that are happening in the air, and their marching orders are debunk everything you can, and even then, at the end of Blue Book, there was a good solid percentage of cases they couldn't even come up with rational debunkings for.
Well, the other telling thing is Hynek. Professor Hynek went the complete opposite
Alan J. Hynek?
Yeah, he went the complete opposite way after Blue Book. And
yes, he did.
He said, you know what? I'm convinced this is a real phenomenon. He devoted his entire rest of his life with Jacques Vallée, who's also a really interesting character. They devoted the rest of their life in partnership investigating all kinds, basically every UFO sighting and every alien abduction, everything all around the country, listening to people's stories. And really, they're kind of responsible for giving us a real modern database of all this stuff because
Vallée is a very important one.
Yeah,
Vallée is effectively the Jacques Cousteau of UFOs, so much so that he's represented by a character in
Close Encounters
of the Third Kind. And what really makes it interesting is that you sort of deal with a situation where there's so much conflicting and confusing information that the moment a discrepancy shows up in a report, the debunkers jump all over it. Like that undoes everything, right? Or a character flaw in the person that's delivering the information. That's all completely debunked because this person was a drinker. It's like there's this absolute absurd need to poo-poo all of this, to sweep it away under the rug. And it makes no sense. There's no logic to that. There is clearly something going on. To presume that pilots, including military pilots, don't know what Venus is, to conclude that people who live in the woods of Kentucky and Tennessee don't know what an owl looks like, to conclude that people drink and hallucinate. I've been very drunk in my life, many times. and I've never hallucinated something that wasn't there, other than, words spoken at me that I took the wrong way and then decided was a challenge or a come on. But that's neither here nor there. So I don't really think we can rely on a lot of these things. Sorry, J. Allen Hynek. We can't rely on a lot of the official sources giving us their information. And I think we're experiencing that right now with all of these congressional hearings on UFOs and all this kind of stuff. And oh my God, these guys that are coming out and claiming to be whistleblowers, yet they have to run their whistleblowing through the FBI and the Air Force before they're allowed to say anything. Well, then you're not a whistleblower. You're just a disinformation agent at that point in time. I firmly believe there is something going on. I firmly believe we are having the truth withheld from us. And I've seen lots of the speculation as to, but I couldn't tell you I have a clear view or belief as to why that is happening. But it is evident that there is a conspiracy of cover-up and disinformation.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, and all that started here around this time, right? Actually started before this, even during, I don't want to go deep into this because I want to save it for another episode, but even during World War II, during the Foo Fighter incident, the Los Angeles incident.
The Battle of Los Angeles. Ooh.
Right. And, they were telling pilots, military personnel, they were telling them in their manuals about these things. They said, if you encounter one of these things, just avoid it. Don't worry about it. It's not malicious. It's not going to hurt you. These things, they said outright, these things are flying around. We've been seeing them, and pilots have been seeing them, and pilots would report them back, even back then during the Second World War. And they just, so they knew about this for a long time.
Sure, but then fast forward the timeline to the 70s and 80s, where commercial pilots who report seeing something are being grounded and being forced into psyche valves after. So how many reports did we never hear because the pilot saw something and then went, I'm not reporting this?
I was going to say, and you mentioned this, there was a concerted effort pretty much after 1947, it seems like, after all this stuff started happening in mass, that there was a concerted effort to make everything out to be a hoax, or everybody was cuckoo or crazy or hallucinating, or they saw swamp gas, or it was a weather balloon. Everything was not real, right? Yeah. And it was a concerted effort by the government. I fully believe that. It without a doubt. I mean, we could just talk about even just Project Blue Book. That whole thing was orchestrated just to show that all this stuff would debunk everything, right?
Everything. It's not real. You're fine. Nathan Twining said so. It's just crazy stuff.
But it's interesting because it all kind of really started here, like with this sighting, and then a week later, we had Roswell.
What a mess Roswell is. We'll get into that one.
No, that might be like a two-parter. But it's kind of all started here, and it's definitely still being withheld from everybody, and even people like presidents of the United States that have tried to dig into this stuff are being withheld information. So that makes me think that it's like some kind of deep state thing that's been buried beyond congressional ears and eyes for the most part. And
be careful, because then we start getting into Majestic 12, which I'm still on the fence on Majestic 12.
Right. I'm not saying it's Majestic 12, but I definitely think that there's like a deep state thing that it's been.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. And that's not a conspiracy, because there are things in the government that happen that, goes against that goes over congressional oversight or over the president, everybody. There are a lot of things that happen that go beyond oversight. And I think this is one of the things.
And that will be our last episode we ever do, by the way, is the one when we do the deep state, secret government episode. Before anything else happens, I would like to just say this for the record. I think the Clintons are wonderful people who do nothing but good. Hillary was robbed, and I ain't afraid no ghost.
Amen. Amen, brother. But yeah, so back to Kenneth Arnold. There's a couple interesting things here. The first one is the bright flash of light. So in modern UFOlogy, we're talking about, modern UFO sightings. There's a lot of speculation and theory and hypothetical things about these things coming from portals and other dimensions. And they may be time travelers, or they might not be coming from literal space, from our time and our dimension. Maybe they're coming from other times and other dimensions.
So you think the flash was a portal?
That's what I'm kind of speculating, because in his original report that he gives, he said these things appeared basically out of nowhere and there was a bright flash of light. So what do you think? Do you think he just saw like a reflection, or do you think this is a thing?
I had always heard the stories he saw a reflection of light. Now, the flash of light is a new one for me that you're bringing to my attention. As for the portal thing, I think portals are in French, we'd say saveur du jour, flavor of the day. Just like skinwalkers became one for a really long period of time where everything was a fucking skinwalker. I think the Skinwalker Ranch gives us the combination of the two, skinwalkers and portals. It's like a Reese's peanut butter cup of the paranormal.
Well, it's got everything.
It's got everything.
Yeah.
Except proof. But that's neither here nor there. I don't look. I've heard they're us from the future. Mm-hmm. I've heard they're extra dimensional. I've heard they're angels and demons. I've heard they live under the water. I've heard they were here first and then we were a slave race. I've heard all the theories about where they come from. And all I'm going to say is I do not know. And no one telling their theories knows either. They're all just making shit.
But it's fun to think about. It's fun to speculate about, right?
Well, it's absolutely, it's a hoot to speculate about. My favorite branch of this, well, there's two. One that we're definitely going to do an episode on, Billy Meyer, the Swedish guy. Oh my God, I can't wait to do the Billy Meyer episode. And the other one being the Stephen Greer was part of it for a long time, the Pleiadian Andromedan Galactic Conference that's going to bring humanity into the galactic community. And just like, you got to look at the generation that made a lot of this shit up. And they were mostly Age of Aquarius boomers. And Age of Aquarius boomers are the most spiritually challenged Western generation that ever lived, because they're into crystals, they're into, their chakra alignments, and they're channeling their gurus. It's just absolute woo-woo, just woo-woo. But they did have an impact on the community, and sometimes you gotta sift through a lot of that garbage to find the correct, or at least tenable, facts.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I all that stuff is definitely goes into woo-woo territory, but at the same time, I do think that there's some truth to anything. So I do believe that there is, higher mental potential and all that stuff. Now we can do a whole episode on that. Because there is some interesting real life proof about that kind of stuff. But I don't believe in crystals, chakras, and all that stuff per se. I mean, there might be something to it, may not, but overall, you're right. It's a lot of like 60s, hippie kind of stuff, and it all came out of that. And which, God bless those people, because they reshaped our society for better or worse. But
the aliens are here to save us from ourselves, because man, it's taken them a while, since apparently I've been hearing about them saving us since like back with the Valiant Thor stories back in the day. And now here we are in 2024 arguing about drones over New Jersey, and yet the aliens still haven't saved us. But I will say this, and I will say it in a voice that will give authority and absolute gravitas to the situation, a voice I have in fact earned, and it is this: there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And that's what we need to keep in mind as we go forward on this show. There are more things, and nothing is off the table, because at the end of the day, honestly, anything is potentially possible, or some aspect of it is possible. Therefore, we must keep open minds. Now, not so open that the brain falls out, as the man says, but open enough that we don't just dismiss something and maybe lose the crystal of truth hidden within it. Well, if you start talking to me about the Akashic record, I'm going to turn off my camera and just go sit.
No, well, here's the thing. I'm a skeptic too. I'm a man of science, but at the same time, I keep an open mind about everything, right? So I don't just dismiss everything right off the bat. And there's an old quote, and I forget who said it, but yesterday's magic is today's science, right?
Sure, and it's to the Asimov. Any science significantly or thoroughly advanced will appear like magic to the uninitiated.
Exactly. So, that's definitely, there's some truth to that. There's a lot of things we do not understand. Yeah. We should always respect science. I think there's a lot of pseudoscience floating around in today's sphere, especially on YouTube. And I'm not about pseudoscience. That's not what I'm trying to do.
It was Arthur C. Clarke. I'm so sorry. I misquoted the big nerd.
Sure. Okay.
Anywho, keep going.
But I definitely keep an open mind about everything, but also try to keep it in the realm of, logic and science. But there are definitely things, of course, we do not understand yet. There's a lot of things in science, even basic principles, we do not fully understand yet. We just have
astronomy. Astronomy. Every other day I see some article about astronomers are telling us how pulsars work, and astronomers are telling us how black hole. You don't know. You're extrapolating a theorem based on the observable evidence that you have.
And that's what a theory is.
That's what a theory is. But the problem is people sit around thinking, and they themselves do this as too, the arrogance of science. They sit around acting like they know everything, yet science evolves. That's the nature of science. It continues to develop. The grand unified theory has not yet been discovered. Dark matter may or may not be real, though they claim it is. I don't know. String theory could be. Who knows? Like, there's all these things that we hear smart, quote unquote, people talk about, and we think, well, they're smart. They must know what they're talking about. Yet if you live long enough on the spectrum, and that's the key point in my 50s that I've learned, if you live long enough, you start to see shit getting debunked, changed, moved around, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you also realize a lot of it is based on mathematical theorem. It is based on them extrapolating potential results from the math that they're observing in the situation. Yeah. But then when we get to the Fermi paradox or the Drake equation, suddenly a lot of these mathematician, brilliant people start going, well, and get all poo-pooey, because again, we're not allowed to have aliens. We're not allowed to have UFOs. Oh, you know how long it would take a UFO to travel from the Pleiades to Earth? It's absolutely impossible. Really, said the guy sitting on the shores of England, wondering what was on the other side of that ocean and how impossible it was to cross said ocean. Or the man looking at the bird, wondering what it would be like to fly, which was impossible for heavier than air flight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're dealing with a civilization that could be 100 years further advanced than us or 1,000,000 years further advanced than us, the idea of them figuring out ways to traverse the galactic sea is not an absurd idea. It is just beyond our ken at this point in time. And we need to remember that. The arrogance of the debunker is just as dangerous as the acceptance of the believer.
Absolutely. And I mean, the other thing is, it really disheartens me that, all this stuff has been written off as woo-woo, and it's been a concerted effort to do so.
Sure.
So science doesn't take it seriously. They don't look at this stuff seriously. You don't have scientists even thinking about all these. Okay, what if, anti-gravity is possible, which actually, I don't know. I don't want to go into that.
Let's not get into that. We'll get into that. I'm sure we'll do an episode on anti-gravity. I'm sure we'll do an episode on the whole theorem that gravity and magnetism are intrinsically linked, and we just don't understand it yet.
Right. Yeah.
Tesla, all that fun stuff. Great show. This is going to be so much fun. Everybody who's listening, man, you better subscribe because this is going to go weird places over the time we do.
Oh, it's going to go weird places for sure. And we're getting way off the Kenneth Arnold thing, but
we're in the last leg of this. What's left to talk about Kenneth Arnold? He saw some shit. He said a thing. A guy coined a term, and now we're here.
Yeah, no, for sure. So we're just having a discussion. We're talking shit, drinking some beer, drinking some coffee. That's what this show's about, folks.
We're drinking coffee beer. It's a new invention from Cody Bear Productions. Coffee beer.
Actually, coffee beer.
Get fucked up and have energy to do crazy shit with it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of topics. I think just to switch into what this podcast will be about, I think there's a lot of topics we can go down, a lot of rabbit holes we can go down. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of woo-woo we encounter, and there's going to be pet theories that some of you in the audience have that one of us will not agree with, or one of us has that the other's like, absolute horseshit, and it's fine because we are adults. We can discuss these things and we can disagree on things without hating each other or needing to, well, that guy's a fucking piece of shit. We can actually just talk and have a fun time. And yeah, I swear a lot. So if your kids are listening, sorry, they got to learn some adult worlds in the world, I mean, I'm tired of censoring myself for other people's children.
We are available for children's parties.
Love it.
No, yeah. So look, that's what this whole point of this show is about. Me and Bear just getting together, talking about our passions for this stuff. And we're going to be covering a broad range of topics. I think you guys understand that we're both pretty skeptical about the whole broad spectrum of this stuff. But at the same time, we have an open mind and we want to believe in some of this stuff.
Let's clarify that a little bit more.
Yeah.
To normal people who are not into this stuff, we're woo-woo.
Oh, for sure.
To the woo-woo people who accept everything is real, we are skeptics.
Yes.
I like to say I walk the middle path. I think Cody also walks the middle path. And, not to get all Siddhartha on you, walking the middle path allows you to see both sides and hopefully find the truth from both to eventually discover the real thing. And that thus ends my Buddhist lesson for the day.
No, but you're right. I mean, I've always taken the middle path. It aggravates a lot of people because I don't ever really, I might take part of a side. I might agree with this side on this and that and this, but I also agree on this side about this and that and this. So, I don't just jump to conclusions. I don't just jump to one side or the other because somebody told me to, the news told me to, or science told me to. If I'm interested in something, I collect all the data and I come to my own conclusions, usually somewhere in the middle, which I think is what every rational human being should do. I think it'd be better for society as a whole if we all...
Now we're getting off on a whole other podcast where we fix society's ills. I would say that
fix it.
Converse to that, or inverse even to that, is the idea that if you believe everything you hear on the news, you're a sucker. I say that having worked in the news. And if you believe everything you read on someone's blog or book about how, Zephyrod came down and took them to the intergalactic, bar, and they had a pan-galactic gargle blaster, and Zephyrod told them the entire story about how aliens are here to save the world, you're also kind of dumb. So maybe understand that you have biases, understand that you have predilections, and understand that you have a need for understanding, and you may have chosen to just fully commit to one side or the other. And the secret to knowledge is to not do that, but step into the middle and observe both sides and then figure out what the truth is for you.
Yeah. And this goes for everything. This goes for every bit of knowledge you can gather, whether it's science or history or politics. To me, this is the way or even gaming, because this is originally a gaming channel. And we're both, talking about gaming stuff. Yeah. So, usually, even gaming, like I kind of don't really take a hard side to anything. I collect what I like from all that stuff and I come up with my own conclusion. Again, somewhere usually in the middle. So,
well, all I will say about myself moving forward is I'm a real hoopy fruit who always knows where his towel is.
Well, so look. We've been going on for almost an hour. I don't think I really have anything else to add on that.
No, I think this is a good cut point. I think we've made our case for Kenneth Arnold. I think future episodes may go longer.
Yeah.
Depending on the information, because some of these topics are going to have way more depth to get into. And I certainly would hope at some point in time in the future, we'll be able to possibly even maybe interview some people and have some interesting guests on. But
that'd be really cool. There's a lot of people I would love to talk to, but
and God knows they're all willing to talk and talk and talk and talk.
Yeah.
Well, that's AM sucks ever since Art left, and then now is no longer with us. So you make up your own minds what you want to listen to. But us, we're going to do this.
Well, I want to leave it at this. I want to leave off the show on this. Kenneth Arnold, do you think he saw something?
Yes.
Do you think it was extraterrestrial?
I don't know.
Okay. So I would say, leaving you guys off, I think Kenneth definitely saw something. I think he was wronged for being ridiculed his whole life. And I definitely think what he saw was not of human origin.
Okay. There you have it.
There you have it. So we'll see you guys sometime. We haven't figured out a schedule for this.
I'm willing to do this every night, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I probably could too, but I don't know if
for
that's
now. Why don't we tentatively say maybe we'll talk to you after Christmas?
Probably after Christmas is when you'll see the next episode. We'll probably do this maybe at this point until I get another computer. It'll probably be like bi-weekly or monthly. We'll see. Just depends on what the schedule is here around the house. But on that note, till next time.
So hang on, before we do that, we're going to start a GoFundMe to get Cody a new computer. I'll post the details on my Discord.
Okay, there you go. So till next time, thanks for everybody that showed up. We had like 25 people watching at one point, which is crazy. I didn't know this many people were interested in this stuff. So that's cool. That's great that so many people are interested. And this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to future episodes. Till next time, we'll see you.
Peace, love, geek.